If I recall correctly, this happened about 9 years ago when I was 14. On Christmas Day at my dad's house, one of the gifts I received was a snowy owl plushie. It wasn't an old or vintage stuffed animal, but a round and circular Beanie Boo, a bit bigger than a basketball. I still have it with me after all these years. Back then, I thought owls were cute and fascinating creatures. They weren't my favorite animals, but I had a love for all creatures. So, I happily took the owl to my bed with my other plushies. Fast forward a few nights, and I experienced sleep paralysis for the first time. Luckily, I was a big fan of dark and creepy internet stuff, so I knew from stories and experiences I'd read to never open my eyes when it happened. I waited it out, and soon enough, I could move my body again. I wasn't too disturbed since the paralysis was short, and I didn't experience anything creepy. I went back to sleep and was fine. But the next 2 nights, it happened again. Each time, it woke me from a deep sleep before starting the paralysis. Still, I didn't see anything creepy, just the temporary paralysis that didn't last long. After those nights, I went back to my mom's house. I lived 50-50 at both my parents' places, usually 3 days at one place, then 4 at the other. At my mom's, I never had sleep paralysis. But when I went back to my dad's, it happened again for 2 more nights. It was once per night and still lasted a short time. But then, I experienced a different incident that made me think it was the owl causing it. After school, I took my usual 30-minute bus ride back to my dad's. I'd be alone for a few hours since my brother stayed in town and my dad was still at work. The house was bright with sunlight beaming through the windows and skylight. Instead of wandering around the house, I grabbed my snowy owl plushie from my bedroom and decided to lay on the couch for a few minutes to rest my legs. Within 1 or 2 seconds after laying down and closing my eyes, I was paralyzed. This time was different because it was so instantaneous and in bright daylight, unlike the other times at night. This time, I felt real fear. I was fully awake 5 seconds before with complete control of my body, and now I was paralyzed? Then, I heard someone slowly walking back and forth a couple of feet in front of me, along with slow, raspy breathing. The house was so light I could see a shadow moving through my eyelids. I was not opening my eyes until it was over. The worst part was when the breathing got closer and came right up to my face. I could feel the slow, raspy breathing on my cheek, and the light through my eyelids went dark as if someone was blocking it. I couldn't tell you how long it lasted, but it felt like 3 to 5 minutes. The breathing slowly moved away from me, then I heard 2 or 3 steps walk away. As soon as the steps were gone, I could move again. Instantly, I picked up my snowy owl plushie and said, "Were you the one causing this the whole time?" Then, I stashed it on my upper closet shelf. Since then, I've never had another sleep paralysis episode, and I always keep that plushie in a separate space. About 3 or 4 years ago, my mom came to visit and stayed in the guest room at my place for the week. She had moved out of town about a year prior. I had kind of forgotten about the owl plushie since nothing had happened after keeping it in a separate space. During that time, that space was on the floor near the bed in the guest room. I only remembered it was there when I asked my mom the next morning how she slept. When I asked her, she was still half asleep, her eyes barely open, walking down the hall to the bathroom. She mumbled back, "I had so many nightmares," with an almost disturbed tone in her voice. I gave her a hug and asked if she wanted to talk about it. Eyes still closed, she furrowed her brows, taking a couple of seconds to recall her nightmares. She then made a nervous groan as if the thought was too painful to recall and walked into the bathroom without saying anything else. I remembered the owl plushie was beside the bed on the guest room floor and quickly moved it to another room while she was still in the bathroom. I went back to the living room to continue watching YouTube. Shortly after, she came out of the bathroom still half asleep and walked straight back to bed. Later that day, I asked her what happened in her nightmares, seeing as she was fully awake by then and probably calmed down. Strangely enough, she replied, "What nightmares?" and said she had no memory of having any, let alone even talking to me that morning.